All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Bible class. And if you're out in the parlor getting your coffee and you can hear me, let this be a word to you to get ready to join us here in the sanctuary as we continue our work through the book of Exodus, studying and talking together about the people of Israel as they make their journey from slavery to freedom. A study that when I first thought it all up back in the fall was going to last exactly 10 weeks. And here we are. Somebody did the math for me the other weeks. I think we're at week 24 now of this. And we are going to finish out the year in Exodus, and then we'll start something fresh in the fall. Just a quick note. I mentioned this in service at 8:30, and we'll mention it again at 11, but for those who may be tuned in online, we will meet 2 more times after today for Bible class. We move to the summer schedule on the 25th of June, and that will move church to 10 in the morning, and we'll take a brief recess for a few weeks on Bible class before we return again on the 10th of September. So keep those dates in mind. Now, for the lesson for today, if you are online, you can download a copy. It's the same lesson that we put up there last week. We sort of barely got into the actual lesson last time, so we'll quickly recover some of the ground that we talked about last time and then move forward in our discussion of God's presence with His people, particularly in and through the tabernacle, and what that means for our life of worship and our assurance of His presence yet today. And as always, questions are more than welcome. In here, obviously, just the old-fashioned stick up your hand works real well. Online, if you want to pop me an email, that is most welcome also. Now, a few gleanings and learnings from the internet this past week. Tesla, you know, they make the electric cars and all environmentally friendly and everything else like this. I hear now that they have included a zero carbon footprint tool for helping you if you get a flat tire. No electricity needed. You can sit at the side of the road and play your accordion while you fill your tire. I don't think that would work, but it's a kind of a funny thought anyway. Sad funeral here in town this week. The local magician's assistant passed away. And our Board of Stewardship had to put a number of new policies in place. You know, there was the whole thing we went through last fall about you got to make your check out to exactly what you need to make your check out to. I'm not even going to say it because I'll mess it up and then we'll have more problems. And then lately here, the pre-authorized debit thing being changed. The Board of Stewardship met earlier this week in an emergency session, and they passed the following policy. So a couple people finally get it, yeah. If you have a habit of stuffing your cash somewhere and bringing it out, yeah, anyway. I don't know what kind of store would I don't know why anybody would put that sign up. Money is money, take it. All right. And then one here, we'll see just how awake you are. 2 salt and pepper shakers. Which one is salt? It's Lot's wife. All right. Okay. I thought that was quite cute, actually. I would actually own a salt and pepper shaker set like that if such a thing really existed. It probably does. There's a picture of it. All right. Welcome again. Lesson notes on the table partway back. Questions always welcome. Let's let's get started. I should say just before we get started, I've just come back from 2 days in our semi-annual meetings with the Roman Catholic Church, the national dialogue between LCC and the Roman Catholic Church. And they're always fascinating discussions that we have together. This time we were talking about marriage and varying, mostly the same understandings, a man and a woman united together by God for life, but also some differences and different approaches to certain things. It was a fascinating discussion. And as it turned out, this particular time, an exercise in our Latin. I had never participated before in a Latin Mass, but I can check that off my box if that was something I wanted to get done in life after Friday morning at 7 o'clock, participating in a Latin Mass. It was different. It's the same, but so they use the same it's the same format we use, but when you put it all in another language, it's a little trickier. Anyway. It was a kind of a one-of. We won't be doing that very often, I don't think. Anyway, let's get on to God dwelling with his people and the things that we do that God has instituted to make his presence known among us. All of this, and I'm just going to sort of recap the very ending of the time that we had together last, or some of what we talked about last time, and then launch forward into the discussion of the tabernacle, which, as I said last time, when people are reading Exodus, they do really well up to about chapter 20, when the Ten Commandments are given. And then chapter 21 launches into this thing called the Book of the Covenant, which goes pretty much to the end of chapter 23, and then chapter 24 is the celebration of the covenant, the scattering of the blood on the altar and on the people, and then Moses and the 70 leaders of Israel going up on the mountain and eating and drinking with God. And people kind of tend to skip things over after that because it does get fairly technical and very heavy on instruction. But the whole thing is set in motion by what is said at the very end of this little section called the Book of the Covenant in Exodus chapter 23. The Book of the Covenant closes with the promise that of what God was going to do for his people. The angel of the Lord, also called my terror, will go before the people so that they can travel safely to their land, enter it, and possess it as his own. God will unconditionally be with his people. He will not forsake them. And they are, in turn, to give to him their unconditional obedience and faith and trust in him. And so God promises, and we know how that promise, in one sense was fulfilled. The pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night, God, a very visible sign of his presence with his people. But God isn't content to just let it be at that. He wants a house. He wants a place among the people. The people are living in tents. This is their accommodation on the journey. And God says, I want to live among my people, living in the same way that they live, in a tent. And so he says to Moses, while Moses is up on the mountain with him, let them make for me a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst. He wants a place, an address, if you will, among the people of Israel. A place that will focus their attention upon his presence, a place to which the people can go, and a place that will be set apart from all of the other places in the camp as the place where God is. And so the tabernacle, which is what this is ultimately called. Its furnishings and even the priests are, in a real sense, a gigantic object lesson in the nearness and the holiness of God. And that's what we want to talk about today, not just the nearness and the holiness of God 3,500 years ago, but the nearness and holiness of God for us as well. Because what God did back then, God is still doing today. Any quick questions, comments, observations before we blast off? All right. Anytime I do that, I'm really just giving myself an excuse to have a sip of coffee. But anyway, let's talk about the tabernacle. I showed this slide last time, but I think it's helpful to see it again. The tabernacle was, for all intents and purposes, a tent inside an enclosure. We talked about this last time. The tent, the enclosure itself was about 150 feet long and about 75 feet wide. It's all measured out in cubits. For those of you who might not be quite up on what a cubit is, it's from your elbow to the tip of your longest finger. So, 18 inches or so for most people, I guess. I don't know. Anybody want to argue about that? Depending on some degree, it's a somewhat arbitrary thing. It's funny today. One of the kids was over, won't name names, Rebecca, but she does all her work in the metric system. Everything is metric in her lab. And she came over and she wanted me to cut something for her on the saw. And she grabbed, I said, how long does it have to be? And she gave me how many centimeters it was. And then she grabbed the tape measure and pulled it out and realized that it was in inches. And she goes, what are we still doing using inches for? This is so outdated, and on and on and on. I went, not out here, it is not. But now somebody gave me a small tape measure that's actually in metric. So next time she comes, here's yours. So you measure it out, and then I'll measure it again to cut it in inches. Okay, anyway. About 150 feet by 75 feet, I think that's still common enough tongue. We understand what's going on. An outer area to which people, the average person, would come. Here is Saul, the average Israelite, bringing in his cow or his ox to be sacrificed. This is where the daily sin offerings were offered by the priests on behalf of the people. The center of the focus in this area was the bronze altar. We'll take a picture, or look at a picture of that in just a few minutes. This is where the sacrifice was offered every day, throughout the day, and various tables on the side to assist with the process of preparing the animal for the sacrifice. The other thing in this outer court of the tabernacle was a bronze laver or washstand. This was for the priests who would minister inside the tabernacle itself. They would wash their hands and perform a ceremonial washing before they would serve in the tabernacle. Going back to my experience the other day, I was reminded of that. Part of the Roman Catholic tradition, when the priest is about to celebrate the sacrament, the priest washes his hands before he does. The deacon or the altar boy will come and pour a little water on the priest's hands, and the priest will dry his hands. A kind of a reminder that nothing unclean, in a sense, is to come on the Lord's altar. My first fieldwork church in Granite City, Missouri, we also had a sink in the sacristy room, And the pastor that I had, he followed that tradition as well. We went into the back room before the start of the communion service. We washed our hands. It was obviously, for cleanliness purposes, but he reminded me very quickly that this was also dates back way into the Old Testament and things like that. The only problem with that particular experience is that the plumbing in that church was all very old, and the tap in the sacristy didn't get turned on very often, and when it did get turned on, it ran rust red, orange through for about a minute, and we didn't have a whole ton of time back there, so this was to be done quickly. So our hands actually came out kind of with this very sort of weird orange look to them, but they were clean, and people who communed also got their iron a little bit. All right, so that's this outer area where a lot of the daily activity where the people of Israel would come for their sacrifices. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
And your feet.
Yes.
And take your shoes off.
Yes, in a mosque, absolutely. Yes, the ceremonial washing. Yeah. No, it's. I'm reminded of what one of our seminary professors at the start of a class on baptism made the observation. He said, whenever people get religious, they start splashing water around. and you think about it for a minute. Almost every faith, every religion has some sort of water thing. It's, I think, a kind of an almost unconscious recognition of the fact we're not clean. And there's something wrong with us. We kind of intuitively know that. Yeah. All right. The real action, in a sense, happens in the inner area. And we talked about this a little bit last time. We'll just kind of quickly cover it for the sake of those who weren't hearing us to set up the further discussions. Inside this particular section, this is the tabernacle proper, the actual covered tent. The rest of the outer area was not covered at all. It was open to the elements, rain and wind, and all of those things could affect what was going on out there. But inside, this was the sacred area. This was the holy area. And basically, the place is divided into two sections. This front section here, called the holy place, and the back section called the Holy of Holies. Oh, I see there's a sign for that. I didn't need to do that. The holy place and the Holy of Holies. All of this is covered by a tent that has 4 layers to it, or actually 4 different coverings. The inner covering made of a fine linen woven together. This was the closer you get to God, the higher the quality of the material, which was then overlaid on the going outward with a curtain of goat's hair. Someone suggested to me, and I haven't really been able to come up with a really good explanation of why the goat hair is there. But somebody commented to me last time, and this may be onto something, that sort of a thing would provide insulation. It does get cold in that part of the world, and it gets very hot, and so maybe some of that to keep. I don't know. Who knows? Then ram skins dyed red to kind of give the thing some substance and some shape, and then an outer covering of badger skins. Some say sea cows. I don't know, like I said, how you get a sea cow at Mount Sinai. I'm a bit befuddled by that. That's a very dry place, and the ocean's a little ways away. But maybe through traders coming through, they may have purchased this. I honestly don't know. But whatever, and there's some debate as to what animal we're actually talking about here. An outer covering, which is obviously weatherproof and very durable, so that the whole inner stuff is preserved and kept safe. And it was only the priests who would come into the holy place, and only the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies. And the high priest could only go in there once a year on the Day of Atonement, where the sacrifice was made for the sins of all the people, and he would go back and sprinkle that sacrifice on the Ark of the Covenant. We'll talk about that in just a bit of a moment here. Okay? So any questions just about the physical layout? Chris?
Take this down and carry it with them?
Yeah, absolutely. This is mobile. Yeah, just about everything. When you get down into the weeds, there's instructions for packing the thing up and everything. We'll see this in a second. Everything, all the furniture's made with rings in it, so poles can go through. We pick it up, we move on. And yeah, it was a mobile structure. It went where they went and was set up where they went. Yeah, sure.
So if it was mobile and they were taking it down, putting it up, were there special people, do you know, that were allowed to go into the Holy of Holies to actually disassemble?
Yeah, that's yeah. Can somebody who looked after things in the Holy of Holies? One would assume that the Levites, together with the high priest, had some. Yeah, the thing had to be, moved. So yeah, there were very definite, probably some provisions on that. I'm not exactly sure what they were, but there were logistics that obviously needed to be covered as well. But kind of as a general rule, yeah. In a certain sense, the church today is somewhat structured like that. In the sense that we've got the narthex where and the nave here where anybody can be. Those who are like we did this morning, those who are communing come closer up, and typically in our services, the only ones who are at the altar, though it's not an absolute hard and fast rule, is the pastor. In a certain sense, there's a little bit of that that still exists today, just in terms of our own architecture as well. All right, the furnishings, the stuff inside. All kinds of different pieces, all had different purposes, and it's interesting that when this is laid out in Exodus 25 and following, it seems like there isn't much of an order to how it all comes, but there is. The order is that we start with the things that are in the thing in the most holy place, then we move out to the holy place, and then we move out into the outer court. So the thing that is in the most holy place is the Ark of the Covenant. And the ark, and also you'll see too, in the construction of these things, the nearer they are to the most holy place, the higher the quality of the construction, or the more precious the material that's used in the construction. So for example, the Ark of the Covenant itself, the basic ark, the box, this part here, is made of acacia wood, which is very hard wood, and is overlaid with pure gold, and has some gold legs on it to hold it up. Very, very high quality. The mercy seat, that's this piece up here, is called the mercy seat. This is where the blood, we'll use lovely red on there, would be sprinkled on the Day of Atonement, with the two cherubims, their wings overarching the mercy seat. This was all pure gold, and done by they kind of hammer the gold into shape. So this would be gold melted together. We know where they get the gold from, of course. They were given gold, silver, and other things by the Egyptians when they left, and that is to be gathered up. We know, of course, that's not the first thing that gets done with the gold. They make a golden calf with it, but in due time, when they finally get settled down again, they make this mercy seat out of pure gold. So this is the highest quality of construction. And inside, of course, would be the resting place for the 2 tablets of stone. And there was also a pot that contained some of the manna that God had given to them. And this was to go before them every step of the way. And the Ark of the Covenant was a significant part of the most important thing in the worship life of the people of Israel, right up to the Babylonian captivity of the church, or of the people of Israel when the ark is gone. We don't know, and Harrison Ford notwithstanding, they haven't found it yet. If you remember the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. And anyway, okay, any questions just about the ark, just quickly? Yeah. All right. Now we move into the holy place. First item in there is the table. This is a table for the showbread. Some of the manna been made into bread and left on the table, along with some plates and other things for bowls and pitchers as well. This is made out of wood, overlaid with gold. The plates are also made of gold, and you can see here that in order to transport this thing, there's a couple rings here and a post that slides through so that it can be carried along the journeys. And this was a reminder of God's presence and His provision for the people every day. The bread would be there, reminding the people of the manna that they were already picking up in the morning. The golden lampstand is another piece of very finely crafted, again hammered from one piece of gold. I'm not even sure how you would even begin to do something like that. And it holds the 7 lampstands, or the 7 oil lamps along the top here, and is symbolic of the tree of life. There's a kind of a sense about this that when you enter into the holy place, you are entering into something that should remind you of Eden, of the Garden of Eden, where stood the tree of life, where God had their, where God provided, and the people had everything that they needed given to them right there. Everything was perfect. The Holy of Holies, paradise itself. But the holy place to be kind of like the Garden of Eden, and there with the tree of life. And then as a symbol, too, of that very close communion between God and His people, the incense altar was put right before the tabernacle curtain. And in the Old Testament, particularly the incense altar, the incense was there as a symbol of prayer. We're somewhat not. I got re-experienced about incense the last couple of days too. In certain prayer services in the Catholic rite, and also, I've seen it done in Lutheran churches. Is not at all common in Lutheran churches. There will be incense at the time of prayer. So on Thursday afternoon, we celebrated the service of Vespers at the end of our working day. And it was very much the same as what we do here in that particular service until we got to the prayers. And then the incense came out, and the incense was liberally, a little more liberally than I'd ever seen it for quite some time. We all were, and I have to say this quickly. I mentioned this to Susan, and she was like, "Ooh, most of us when we think of incense, we think of that stuff you buy in the, that we had in dorm rooms in the '70s. Those things you put, and they stink terribly. This ain't that. Church incense is very different than that. It's a kind of a resin. And it's from trees, and it actually has a very pleasing odor. If you like the smell of burning resin from trees, but it actually has a very natural kind of fragrance because it comes from. This isn't some concoction of chemicals. This is something very natural. And the symbol is prayer. As the smoke goes up, so also our prayers, and a symbol of the communion that we are to have with God and the closeness of our prayers. When you think, for example, just outside the holy place during the day was a pillar of what? Pillar during the daytime was cloud. And so our prayers, ascend into the cloud, and just that whole idea. And the pillar of fire by night, what do fires, typically make a little bit of smoke. So just that whole very close communion, that close relationship between God and his people is what's being symbolized there. All right. Have no fear. We're not running out and buying a thurible and other things like that. It's an interesting thing to see, but it is very much not part of our custom at all. All right. From there, we move into the outer section of the tabernacle, and this is that altar that would be in the outer court where the daily sin offerings were made, and this too, designed for portability. And when you look also very closely, designed, realizing its purpose. The bottom of this altar, as well as the other one up there, wasn't a solid structure. It was a grate, so that the ashes go down. This is like on your barbecue. So that things would go where they were supposed to go, and you just clean it out underneath when you need to clean it out underneath. It's all there's a certain I'm trying to think of what the word is here. A certain kind of just practicality, I guess, about the whole thing. Again, this is now made out of bronze. We've moved out of the holy place and the most holy place. We're using a much more common, less expensive metal here, bronze, and again some poles for lifting. And then the washing basin. Very hard to get a good picture of this, at least the one that I could find. This is probably as good as one needs. It was a big thing. It was not just a little bowl or a basin or something like that, but it was a pretty good size, and several people could use it at the same time. So, Ray.
Getting back to the bread that the Rip was saying, manna.
Yeah.
Was it leavened bread or unleavened?
I would presume probably unleavened bread. For those online who couldn't hear the question, was the showbread leavened bread or unleavened bread? Off the top of my head, I wouldn't say for sure, but my guess is probably unleavened. But I don't honestly know. Yeah, I would say just off the top of my head, the kind of the preponderance of things would lead me to say unleavened bread. Yeah. I'm going to pass the sheets around. These aren't the usual sheets; they're just regular sheets. But I think you're swift enough. You'll figure out what to do. All right. And I don't want to belabor the show and tell part of this, but I do think it is kind of, to me it's sort of interesting to see this and just to even see that, in a certain sense, churches today, particularly ones like ours, which are built on the long, are very much follow that same kind of thinking and theology as did the tabernacle. In a certain sense, what we do here is really a continuation of what began already then. All right. If you want to read an interesting book, this isn't the place really for book reviews, but there's a very, very fascinating book if you're interested in these kinds of things. It's actually written by a Canadian author. Her name is Margaret Visser. And she wrote a book, came out about 20 years ago now, called The Geometry of Holiness. And what this book does, it's fascinating. I found it fascinating anyway. She's an anthropologist, but she's also a Christian. And what she does is she takes a little-known church in Rome and walks through this little-known church and brings out all the symbolism that's there, and that and makes connections between Old and New Testament. As I was studying this, I had to dig the book out again. The book is called The Geometry of Love, and she's quite a good writer, and it's just a fantastic little look at how sacred space, and the symbolism that's used sometimes in sacred spaces still today is very, very fascinating. Very fascinating book. Anyway. All right, let's get to what's really going on here. We've got all this lovely furniture, this well-constructed tent, all of these sorts of things. And what's the point of all of this? Well, God tells us the point in Exodus chapter 29 after he gives all the instructions and everything is being passed along to Moses here. And God sums it all up this way. At the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord, where I will meet with you to speak with you there I will meet with the people of Israel, and it shall be sanctified, made holy. We remember what sanctified means, to make something holy, by my glory. Unique and as gifted as the craftsmen were, this was not made holy by them. As consecrated and devout as the priests were, this was not made holy by them. It was sanctified by his glory, his presence. I will consecrate the tent of meeting and the altar. Aaron also and his sons I will consecrate to serve me as priests. I will dwell among the people of Israel and will be their God. And they shall know that I am the Lord their God, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, that I might dwell among them. I am the Lord. So this is where God, in a sense, God's address is. Yes, he fills all heaven and all earth. Yes, he's all powerful and he's everywhere and all knowing and all of that. But this is the specific place where God will make that presence real to the people. And as I hinted when we talked about this going through, one of the things that this was to recall or bring to mind for the people was the story of creation and the reality of the Garden of Eden, where people dwelt together. Adam and Eve dwelt in a paradise in perfect communion with God. And there's similarities. We won't read through all the ins and outs of the chapters to talk about this, but there's similarities from the story of creation to the creation of the tabernacle. First of all, in Genesis chapter 3, the Spirit of God hovers over the water. The Spirit is, God speaks the world into being, and it is the Spirit who hovers over everything. And in Exodus, off the top of my head, I should have written down I didn't. Oh well, I think it's in Exodus 31. There's a man named Bezalel, who's a craftsman from the tribe of Judah. And it specifically says that he is filled with the Spirit of God to oversee the construction of the tabernacle and all its furnishings. So the Spirit, again, hovering over the creation, gifting the people. We often think of spiritual gifts, as being, things like, preaching and teaching and faith and prayer and all of those kind of things. Interesting to think of a spiritual gift as something very concrete, that ability to craft something with your hands, to know how something is got to be put together, because God hasn't, He's given verbal instructions, but as far as we know, He never handed anybody a blueprint and said, here's how you do it, here's the drawings, this is what I want. When I build something, I need that. I need a plan. I physically find it very, very difficult to conceive of something in my mind and then construct it. I need it all laid out. This is what I do. This is how I cut. This is how long it needs to be, and all of that sort of thing. That's just how I am. I'm not gifted at that. But to have that is highlighted here as a spiritual, in a certain sense, a spiritual gift, a gift from God to be able to do that sort of thing. Same with music. If I ever play music, I got to have the notes right in front of me. It's boom, 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 boom. But those who can sit down and just play it, I'm just like, how does that happen in your head? I have no clue. Anyway, the dedication of the temple occurs on a day celebrating the new calendar year. I should have put the word calendar in here because you remember the people of Israel had 2 New Years. The first New Year was the church year, so to speak, which began with the Passover. Similar to our church New Year beginning in Advent, which is close to the calendar year. But the calendar year for the Jewish people, anybody want to take a guess what month of the year that's in? October. When they celebrate the feast of Rosh Hashanah. And the Christian church still has a day, too. It's very underplayed, that marks the first day of creation. They say we don't have a church service or anything else like that, but whether it's the actual first day of creation or not on the calendar, who knows? Anybody want to take a guess as to what that day is? My birthday. October 23rd is the day that on church calendars is the remembrance of the first day of creation. Anyway, I've always thought that was kind of cool. Anyway, just myself. All right, I'm just checking to see if we have any emails here. I haven't even looked the whole hour. Nope. Oh well, maybe. God is omnipresent. Yes. Okay, yeah, Tim has a question here about, isn't he already? Yes, we'll get to this in just a minute. We'll get to Tim's question as we finish. This is an important thing. Okay, so Eden and the tabernacle are both places where God dwells with his people. I talked about the menorah already. Both the entrance to Eden and the tabernacle are from the east. From that direction. I always get mixed up here. I'm pretty good all the way around town here. I can tell my north, south, east, and west, except when I get here. And I always remember which way the church faces. I have to think about this a little bit, because the church doors face west. And I remember when I got here, and I was having a day of kind of homesickness for the West. And I remember thinking to myself, I can stand on the church steps and I can look west. You know, I'm sort of the opposite of the Muslim who has to look east. I'll look west. Anyway, and my house is to the west too, so I figured that out eventually. And Eden is guarded by cherubim, and cherubim sit on top of the Ark of the Covenant. And also too, I didn't mention this on the way through, but the curtain between the holy place and the most holy place actually has cherubim woven into it. I think that comes up on a little bit later slide. Now for us, what does this mean? Okay, for them, this pointed them to some degree backwards. And yeah, it should do that for you and for me too. In this book called The Geometry of Love that I was talking about, this is the church in Rome that the author describes in infinite detail. She talks about the narthex of the church, the area where we gather and have our conversations and have our fellowship with each other. She said in that church, in its original construction, and still today, the narthex is filled with plants. All kinds of plants, big plants. So that the idea being Eden. And that fellowship that we have. And then you come into the church, and the nave, and in a lot of Catholic churches too, you'll see on the sides of the wall in the Catholic churches the Stations of the Cross. And the Stations of the Cross kind of tell us of journey. Remind us of journey, in particular Jesus' journey to the cross. But in a real way, we're all on a journey. The nave is from the word navy. People go in ships. Why? Because they're on a journey. And we come into the nave, this main area, and we're on a journey. And where's the journey taking us to? To the holy place, to the paradise, to where God is. And so even today, a little bit of this still trickles down in our thinking. And particularly with the tabernacle. Tabernacle language comes back in a couple of very important places in the Bible. And one of the most important places where it comes, and we'll just look at this slide, and then we'll stop for today, is from the book of Revelation, chapter 21, right near the end of the Bible. Revelation only has 22 chapters, and this is the beginning of the second last chapter of the book. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. There's a whole lot there to unpack, but we'll leave that for another day. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold the dwelling place." And when you look at the Greek, the word that's there for dwelling place is the Greek word for tabernacle. The dwelling place, the tabernacle of God is with men. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. The tabernacle and this idea of God dwelling with us is the ultimate goal of all history. That in the new heaven and the new earth, which I'll just say parenthetically, is, to me at least, a far more comforting way to look at what God has in store for us than simply saying heaven in some sort of vague sense. I don't know about you, but the kind of the picture of that that's sometimes given of people sitting on clouds strumming a harp from for all, that does nothing for me. I mean, frankly, that's not something I would look forward to at all. And when you really dig into the New Testament's understanding of what is to come, this would be a whole Bible study in and of itself. It's a new heaven and a new earth, a creation renewed and restored and put right again. And this is the ultimate tabernacle. So even as the first tabernacle, points back to Eden and to the paradise that people had there with God, so also it points forward to the ultimate tabernacling dwelling of God with people in the new heavens and the new earth. All right. Ray, we have time for just about one or two questions, and then we've got to give way.
The universe.
Yeah.
And then there's heaven where God dwells
Yeah.
with angels and so on.
Yeah.
And in which case, a new heaven, new earth. Which heaven is it?
Well, it is. Yeah. Well, which one is it? Heaven is this new heaven and this new earth. It's a little more precise way of speaking about it, I think, and a little more easy for us as humans, I think. I don't know about you, but I always had those nights when I was a kid, and I'd try to imagine what, infinity was like, eternity was like. And you lay in bed at night, and you're going to go, I'm going to live forever? What's forever? And eventually your brain kind of just sort of like almost has a Charlie horse, because it just can't think of that. You can almost feel the thing cricking over, so God uses. I don't know what it's actually physically going to be like, but He uses terms like this that we can relate to: a new heaven, a new earth. Where we still have purpose and reason to, besides plinking on the old harp for forever. All right, we need to give way for a sound check here, and so we'll leave it there. We've got a little more to go on the tabernacle, and then we're going to talk next time a little bit about the golden calf incident. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but what do the people do while Moses is getting all this holy stuff? And then the last session we're going to talk about is the new Moses. We want to look at how Jesus is really the new Moses, but that will all come in due course. Let's close with prayer. We thank you, Lord, that in spite of all that really should separate us from you and you from us, you want to be with us, to dwell with us and among us. And we ask that you would strengthen us in our faith in your presence and help us to see things like the tabernacle and even the church in which we sit as something that testifies to that presence, your real presence with us. We ask, Lord, that you would bless and be with us this day. We thank you for the bright sunshine, the cooler temperatures, and we ask, Lord, that you would use us in everything to your glory for Jesus' sake. Amen. All right, we'll leave it at that for now. Sound check people need to come, and we will forge ahead.